You wake to the familiar taste of metal in your mouth, the recycled air of Hive Tertius carrying its usual cocktail of industrial lubricants and human sweat. Your name is Jorik Vance, though that detail will matter less and less as this day progresses. You don't know it yet, but you're about to experience the last 24 hours where that name means anything at all. The protein paste slides down your throat like congealed despair, its synthetic nutrients designed by administratum nutritionists who have never tasted real food. You barely notice the flavor anymore, or rather, the complete absence of it. Your calloused fingers trace the worn surface of your pick slate, lingering on the cracked image of your daughter Myra. She died 3 years ago in the plague sweeps, but this moment of looking at her face each morning is the only ritual that still feels human in your mechanical existence. The manufactorum floor stretches before you like a cathedral of industry, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadows punctuated by the red glow of servoskulls. Servoskulls. They drift through the air with their dead, mechanical eyes, monitoring productivity, recording inefficiencies, watching. Always watching. But you've grown so accustomed to their presence that you barely register them anymore. These floating reminders of what happens when flesh is deemed more useful as machinery than as humanity. You don't realize it yet, but they're not just watching your work. They're cataloging you. Your station awaits. Industrial press designation Sigma 7, a massive hydraulic beast that can exert 40 tons of pressure per square inch. For 12 years, you fed sheet metal into its hungry maw, watched it transform raw materials into components for Imperial Guard vehicles. 12 years of the same motion, over and over, your body wearing down in service to the machine wearing down in service to the Imperium. The morning shift begins like any other. The klaxon screams its metallic reveille, and 10,000 workers move as one organism through the corridors. You become part of this human river, your individuality dissolved into collective purpose. But if you could see yourself from above, as the servoskulls do, you'd notice something different about today's procession. You'd see the way certain workers are marked with subtle designations on their work assignments. You'd see the medical servitors positioned at strategic locations throughout the facility. You'd see that this isn't a normal workday. It's a harvest day. The accident happens at 14:47:23 Terran Standard. The timestamp will be recorded with mechanical precision, because everything about what follows depends on exact measurements, precise timing, calculated efficiency. You're reaching across press Sigma 7 to clear a jam, a routine action you've performed thousands of times before. But today, the safety lockout fails, not through neglect or malfunction, but by design. The press descends with 40 tons of Imperial judgment. You have perhaps 2 seconds to understand what's happening. 2 seconds where you're still completely, undeniably human. 2 seconds where your mind floods with clarity, the smell of machine oil, the distant hum of generators, the face of your daughter smiling from that cracked pick slate. 2 seconds to realize that the servoskulls aren't moving to alert anyone. They're simply recording. The pain comes in waves that redefine your understanding of sensation itself. Your torso folds under pressure that was never meant to touch human flesh, ribs snapping like kindling, organs rearranging themselves in ways that biological evolution never intended. But here's what you don't expect. You remain conscious. The pain is extraordinary, but your mind stays sharp, crystal clear, as if the trauma has somehow heightened rather than diminished your awareness. That's when you hear them approaching. Not the heavy boots of rescue workers or the urgent mechanical whir of medical equipment rushing to save your life. Instead, you hear the soft pneumatic hiss of servitors gliding across the manufactorum floor. Their movements are precise, unhurried, methodical. They're not racing against time to preserve your life. They're moving with the careful efficiency of processors examining raw materials. The first servitor to reach you was once named Marcus Feldman. He doesn't remember this, of course. His cranium now houses cogitator arrays instead of memories, mechadendrites instead of dreams. The name Marcus exists only in administratum records filed under resource allocation, successful conversion. But if you could see past the mechanical modifications, past the brass fixtures and neural implants, you might recognize the basic bone structure of a man who once stood exactly where you're lying now. He examines your crushed torso with sensors that were once human eyes. His assessment is thorough and dispassionate. Subject exhibits grade A tissue viability despite structural compromise. Nervous system, functional. Cognitive capacity, within acceptable parameters. Recommendation, immediate harvest and processing. Harvest and processing. The words register in your mind with the weight of revelation. This isn't a rescue, it's a procurement operation. The accident wasn't an accident. It was a trigger event, a carefully orchestrated moment designed to provide the Imperium with fresh material for its endless appetite for human resources. You understand now why the safety systems failed, why the servoskulls made no move to help, why the medical response is so efficiently inhuman. You try to speak, to cry out, to assert your humanity in the face of this mechanical evaluation. But the damage to your torso has compromised your diaphragm, and only a wet, gasping sound emerges. The servitor, Marcus, though he'll never know that name again, interprets this as confirmation of respiratory function. He makes a notation on his data slate with mechanical fingers that were once capable of caressing a lover's face. More servitors arrive. They work with the choreographed precision of an assembly line in reverse, each one cataloging different aspects of your biological worth. One measures bone density. Another tests neural responsiveness by introducing probes into your spine. You feel each insertion like lightning through your nervous system. A third takes tissue samples from your arms, your legs, anywhere the crush damage hasn't compromised material integrity. You are still Jorik Vance. You still remember your daughter's laugh, the taste of real bread from your childhood, the weight of hope when you first came to the hive looking for work. But with each measurement, each sample, each clinical notation, those memories become less relevant to the servitors surrounding you. To them, you are becoming a collection of salvageable components arranged in the rough shape of a human being. The final servitor to examine you carries equipment you don't recognize, devices that probe not your body but something deeper. It positions sensors against your skull and runs what you'll later understand as psychic resonance tests. This machine is measuring your soul, quantifying the strength of your consciousness, determining how much awareness should be preserved in whatever you're about to become. And the readings are excellent. Consciousness coherence, 94.7%, the servitor reports in a voice that might have once sung lullabies to children. Emotional resonance, high amplitude across all spectrums. Memory retention, functionally complete. Subject approved for premium conversion track. Premium conversion track. You don't know what that means yet, but the phrase fills you with a terror deeper than the physical agony of your crushed body. There's something in those clinical words that speaks to a fate worse than death, something that makes the pain in your chest seem insignificant by comparison. They lift you onto a gurney with mechanical arms that move with impossible gentleness. The servitors handle you like precious cargo, not because they care about your comfort, but because they're protecting valuable material from further damage. Every movement is calculated to preserve maximum tissue viability, to keep your nervous system functional, to maintain the integrity of what they're about to harvest. As they transport you through corridors you've walked for 12 years, you catch glimpses of your fellow workers. Some pause in their labors to watch your procession, their faces showing not sympathy but a kind of resigned understanding. They know. They've always known. The servoskulls, the medical servitors positioned throughout the facility, the careful monitoring of worker health and psychological profiles, it's all been leading to moments like this. You see fear in their eyes but not surprise. They've seen others taken before, workers who suffered accidents or mechanical failures that resulted in salvage-grade injuries. They've noticed the empty bunks, the reassigned workstations, the way certain people simply disappear from the daily routine of hive life. But they've also learned not to ask questions, not to investigate, not to think too deeply about the systematic efficiency with which the Imperium processes human resources, because thinking too deeply might make them candidates for premium conversion track themselves. The Medici facility emerges from the industrial maze like a temple dedicated to mechanical resurrection. Its white walls gleam with antiseptic cleanliness that stands in stark contrast to the grimy functionality of the manufactorum floor. But this cleanliness isn't meant to comfort. It's the sterile environment necessary for the precise work about to begin. They wheel you through doors marked with the Mechanicus cog and the Imperial Aquila intertwined, symbols that should represent protection and salvation, but now seem to leer down at you with mechanical malevolence. The corridor beyond is lined with examination rooms, each one occupied by figures that might have once been human, but now exist in various states of conversion between flesh and machinery. You catch glimpses as you pass. A woman whose arms have been replaced with industrial manipulators, her eyes still recognizably human but empty of everything that once made them shine with life. A man whose skull has been opened to accommodate cogitator arrays, cables snaking from his brain to monitoring equipment that displays his thoughts as scrolling data streams. A child, Emperor preserve us, a child, whose small body has been fitted with mechanical wings and hover units, transforming her into what the Imperium calls a cherub, but what your horrified mind recognizes as a grotesque parody of innocence. They are all conscious, they are all aware, and they are all looking at you with expressions that you're only now learning to interpret. The hollow gaze of beings who remember what it was like to be human, but can no longer access those memories in any meaningful way. This is where your journey into the depths of Imperial mercy begins. This is where you discover that, in the grim darkness of the far future, death is a privilege reserved for those whose flesh has nothing left to offer the Emperor's endless war machine. The servitor that was once Marcus wheels you into Conversion Chamber 7, where surgical equipment waits with the patient hunger of predators. The machines gleam with a cleanliness that speaks to their sacred purpose, for this is holy work, the transformation of base human flesh into sanctified imperial machinery. As consciousness begins to fade under the influence of neural suppressants, chemicals designed not to spare you pain, but to prevent your struggles from damaging valuable tissue, you cling to one final thought, the image of your daughter's face, smiling from that cracked pick slate. You don't know it yet, but that image will be the last truly human thought you'll have for a very, very long time. But what if the accident wasn't the end of your story? What if it was just the beginning of something far worse than death? To understand what happens to Jorik Vance, you must first understand the vast, invisible machinery that makes his transformation not an aberration, but a routine function of imperial governance. You must see the system that turns human suffering into bureaucratic efficiency, that transforms personal tragedy into statistical success. Welcome to the flesh markets of the Imperium, where humanity itself has become the most carefully regulated commodity in the galaxy. Picture, if you can, the sheer scale of human processing that occurs across 10,000 worlds every single day. On Armageddon, the great forge cities consume 40,000 workers annually to industrial accidents, but yield 62,000 functional servitors through conversion protocols. On Cadia Prime, before its fall, battlefield casualties were processed at a rate of 15,000 bodies per hour during peak conflict periods. On peaceful agri-worlds like Demeter VII, the old, the sick, and the non-productive are systematically evaluated for biological contribution potential. The numbers are so vast they lose meaning. But behind each statistic is a Jorik Vance, a human being with dreams and fears and memories of better days, whose final service to the Emperor will be rendered not in glorious battle, but on the surgical tables of conversion facilities. The Administratum has developed a classification system for human flesh with the same meticulous care they apply to managing ammunition supplies or vehicle maintenance schedules. Form 47 Alpha Tertius, Biological Resource Assessment and Allocation, runs to 47 pages, and covers every conceivable category of human material processing. Grade A classification represents the premium tier, subjects with intact nervous systems, robust physical conditioning, and psychological profiles indicating strong mental resilience. These are your factory workers, your PDF troopers, your mid-hive citizens whose bodies have been strengthened by manual labor, but whose minds remain functional enough to house complex servitor programming. Jorik Vance falls into this category. His 12 years of industrial work have given him the physical durability necessary for heavy servitor conversion, while his psychological attachment to his daughter's memory demonstrates the emotional capacity that makes consciousness retention both possible and profitable. Grade B encompasses those suitable for organ harvesting and biological material reclamation. The elderly whose minds have begun to fail but whose organs remain viable. The sick whose conditions preclude servitor conversion, but whose tissues can still serve imperial needs. The criminal whose bodies will pay the price for their sins against imperial law. These subjects undergo systematic disassembly in facilities that process human flesh with the same efficiency as food preparation centers, which, given the Imperium's reliance on corpse starch as a protein source, is perhaps a more accurate comparison than metaphor. Grade C represents basic biomass, those whose bodies are too damaged, too diseased, or too degraded for higher-tier processing. Even these are not wasted. The Imperium has perfected the art of reducing human flesh to its component proteins, minerals, and organic compounds. What cannot serve as a servitor's heart can still nourish a guard regiment's rations. What cannot house a machine's consciousness can still fuel a hab block's protein dispensers. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is mourned. Nothing is considered sacred except the act of service itself. The processing centers operate with industrial efficiency that would be admirable if applied to any other material. Take Processing Station Omega-7 on Mordian Prime, a facility that handles biological resource allocation for an entire sector. Its throughput capacity is rated at 12,000 units per day, units that were once called people, but whose linguistic designation has evolved along with their material status. You walk through the reception areas and see conveyor systems that move with mechanical precision, sorting incoming subjects by classification codes assigned during initial assessment. The Grade A candidates move along Track Alpha toward conversion facilities equipped with the most sophisticated surgical servitors and neural interfacing equipment. Grade B subjects flow toward Track Beta, where organ extraction and tissue processing occurs with clinical efficiency. Grade C materials proceed to Track Gamma, where industrial biomass reduction transforms human flesh into nutrient paste. The workers overseeing these operations are themselves servitors, beings who once entered these same facilities as subjects and now serve as processors, their human memories selectively edited to remove any emotional attachment to the biological materials they handle. They work with the dedicated efficiency of those who no longer remember why such work might once have seemed horrifying. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of these facilities isn't their scale or efficiency, it's their banality. The workers take scheduled breaks, during which they consume the same corpse starch rations produced from yesterday's processing. They file reports on productivity quotas and equipment maintenance needs. They attend briefings on safety protocols designed to protect valuable servitor assets from workplace hazards. This is what systematic dehumanization looks like when implemented by the most powerful bureaucracy in human history. Not screaming chaos or dramatic evil, but the quiet, methodical reduction of human beings to resource allocation problems. The biologist facilities represent the scientific apex of human processing technology. Here, tech adepts of the Mechanicus apply their sacred knowledge to the problem of maximizing biological utility. They've developed preservation techniques that can maintain organ viability for months after harvest. They've created neural interfacing protocols that allow for precise control over which memories and personality traits survive servitor conversion. They've engineered biological recycling processes that can transform human waste products into useful industrial materials. The tech adepts who oversee these operations view their work as a form of sacred communion with the Omnissiah. Each successful conversion represents a victory over the weakness of flesh, a step toward the mechanical perfection that awaits all faithful servants of the Emperor. They approach human processing with the reverent dedication of artisans crafting masterpieces, their every action guided by sacred algorithms that ensure maximum efficiency and minimum waste. You observe one such tech adept, Magos biologist Zarin, as he reviews the day's processing schedules. His organic components are minimal: a brain housed in a crystalline preservation matrix, a few specialized organs maintained for their unique biochemical functions, a spinal cord enhanced with cybernetic neural amplifiers. The rest is machine, perfect, efficient, free from the limitations that plague unaugmented flesh. He examines Jorik Vance's assessment files with sensors that analyze biometric data at the molecular level. Height, weight, muscle density, neural conductivity, psychological resilience factors. All are quantified and compared against optimal parameters for different servitor classifications. To Magos Zarin 449, Jorik represents an excellent candidate for Type VII industrial servitor conversion, with psychological modification protocols that will preserve motor skills while eliminating emotional responses. Specimen exhibits optimal characteristics for heavy labor applications. He intones in a voice modulated by Vox grills that strip away any trace of organic warmth. Recommend full cognitive restructuring with retention of technical knowledge base. Estimated service life: 47 years, 3 months, 16 days. 47 years. That's how long Jorik's converted form will serve Imperial needs before his biological components degrade beyond repair. 47 years of consciousness without autonomy, awareness without choice, memory without meaning. For Magos Zarin 449, this represents exceptional return on resource investment. For Jorik, it represents an eternity of mechanical servitude. But this is only the beginning. The individual horror of one man's conversion pales beside the systematic scale of human processing that defines Imperial civilization. Across the galaxy, billions of beings who once walked and breathed and dreamed now serve as components in the vast machine that is the Imperium of Man. Consider the mathematics of conversion. On a single hive world, natural mortality provides approximately 1 million bodies annually for processing. Industrial accidents contribute another 500,000. Military actions, criminal executions, and administrative corrections add roughly 2 million more. That's 3.5 million human beings per world per year, feeding into the flesh markets of imperial bureaucracy. Multiply that by 10,000 worlds, and you begin to grasp the scale of systematic human processing that occurs every single day across the Imperium. 35 billion human beings annually transformed from individuals into resources, from people into products, from souls into servitors. The supply chains that support this system rival those of any other Imperial operation. Specialized transport vessels move processed materials between facilities. Communication networks coordinate conversion schedules across planetary systems. Quality control mechanisms ensure that servitor production meets administratum standards for functionality and durability. There are entire subsectors of the imperial bureaucracy dedicated to nothing but biological resource management. Scribes whose entire careers involve optimizing human processing workflows. Administrators who have never seen a living human being, but spend their days managing databases of converted flesh. Logistics specialists who plan shipping routes for organs and neural tissue with the same attention to detail they'd apply to weapons or fuel distributions. And at every level of this vast machinery, the language used to describe the process grows more clinical, more distant from the human reality it represents. biological resources instead of people, conversion protocols instead of surgical dismantlement, optimal utilization instead of the systematic destruction of human consciousness. This linguistic distancing isn't accidental, it's essential to the system's function. To acknowledge that these resources were once human beings with families and dreams and fears would make the work psychologically impossible for those who implement it. The bureaucratic language serves as a protective barrier, allowing imperial administrators to process human flesh with the same emotional detachment they'd show toward any other commodity. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the flesh markets isn't their scale or efficiency. It's their complete integration into the fabric of imperial society. This isn't a hidden atrocity carried out in secret by shadowy organizations. It's official policy, implemented through proper channels, documented in official reports, justified by imperial doctrine. Every imperial citizen knows that industrial accidents can lead to conversion. Every worker understands that serious injury might result in servitor processing rather than medical treatment. Every parent lives with the knowledge that their children's bodies will one day serve imperial needs, whether in life or in mechanical resurrection. And they accept this, not because they're monsters, but because the alternative, questioning the fundamental structure of imperial society, is literally unthinkable within the cultural framework that defines their existence. The flesh markets aren't an aberration of imperial civilization. They are imperial civilization, stripped of comforting illusions and revealed in all their systematic, bureaucratic horror. This is the machinery that awaits Jorik Vance as he lies unconscious in Conversion Chamber 7. This is the system that will process his flesh, catalog his memories, and redistribute his biological components according to the optimal efficiency protocols developed over 10,000 years of human resource management. He is not special. He is not unique. He is simply the next unit to be processed by the most sophisticated flesh market in galactic history, a market that runs on human suffering and produces mechanical salvation, where the only currency that matters is the pound weight of salvageable meat. And somewhere in the depths of processing station Omega 7, machines are already calculating how best to use every fragment of what he used to be. You float back to consciousness like a drowning man rising through black water, your awareness returning in fragments that don't quite fit together. The first thing you notice isn't pain, though that will come, but the absence of something fundamental that you can't immediately identify. It takes several moments of confused inventory before you realize what's missing: the ability to move. You are Jorik Vance and you cannot move. Your eyes open to harsh white illumination that burns through your retinas like accusations. The ceiling above you is a masterwork of surgical precision. Sterile ceramic panels intersected by mechanical arms that hang like mechanical spiders, each one equipped with instruments whose purposes you recognize from your worst nightmares. Scalpels that could section bone. Probes designed to navigate neural pathways. Injection systems loaded with chemicals whose names you cannot pronounce but whose effects you are about to experience firsthand. You try to speak, to call out, to make any sound that might attract human attention. But no sound emerges from your throat, not because of physical damage, but because of what they've done to your nervous system. The paralytic agents coursing through your bloodstream have isolated your consciousness in the prison of your skull, leaving you aware but utterly powerless to affect the world around you. This is not mercy. This is precision. They need you conscious for what comes next. The surgical servitors enter the chamber with movements that blend human grace with mechanical efficiency. There are 6 of them, each one a masterpiece of conversion technology that demonstrates exactly what awaits you in the hours to come. They were once human beings like yourself, workers, soldiers, citizens who found themselves strapped to surgical tables in chambers identical to this one. Now they serve as instruments of transformation, their human knowledge and dexterity preserved and enhanced for the sacred work of flesh modification. the lead servitor approaches your table, and you're forced to confront the horrifying artistry of its construction. Its torso houses banks of medical cogitators that process biometric data in real time, monitoring your vital signs with inhuman precision. Its arms have been replaced with modular surgical instruments that shift and reconfigure based on the specific procedures being performed. Its head retains enough human features to be recognizable as having once belonged to a person, but the eyes have been replaced with targeting sensors that analyze your body at the cellular level. It was once named Dr. Sarah Chen, a skilled trauma surgeon who dedicated her life to saving others. That information exists in administratum medical records, filed under resource allocation, successful conversion, medical specialization track. But the being examining you now retains only the technical knowledge of surgical procedures, enhanced by mechanical precision, and stripped of any emotional connection to the human suffering those procedures might cause. Subject Vance Jorik, classification, Grade A premium conversion track. It announces in a voice that blends human vocal cords with mechanical modulators. Surgical protocol, Type VII industrial servitor with enhanced consciousness retention. Estimated procedure time, 14 hours 37 minutes. 14 hours, more than half a day during which you will remain conscious, aware, and utterly helpless while they systematically dismantle your humanity with surgical precision. The paralytic agents will keep you motionless but fully aware throughout the entire process, because consciousness serves a purpose in servitor conversion. Your ongoing awareness allows the surgical servitors to monitor neural responses in real time, ensuring that the specific memories and skills they wish to preserve remain intact, while those deemed unnecessary are carefully excised. The first incision is made with ceremonial precision along your sternum, the servitor's blade parting flesh, with the same reverent care a priest might show when handling sacred relics. Blood wells up along the cut, but sophisticated circulation management systems immediately compensate, maintaining optimal blood pressure while allowing the surgical team access to your thoracic cavity. You feel every moment of the blade's progress, every fiber of tissue being severed, every nerve being deliberately preserved for future mechanical interface. Pain floods your nervous system, but it's not the chaotic agony of injury. It's controlled, measured, designed to provide maximum information to the surgical team while keeping you functional throughout the procedure. They need to know which neural pathways are responding normally, which reflexes remain intact, which aspects of your consciousness can be safely modified without compromising the final product. Because that's what you are now, a product being assembled according to specifications developed over millennia of human processing. The second servitor begins work on your extremities, carefully sectioning muscle groups and identifying the optimal attachment points for mechanical replacements. Your arms, which once held your daughter, once operated Press Sigma 7, once touched your lover's face in moments of tenderness, are evaluated purely for their structural utility. Bone density is measured, joint flexibility is assessed, nerve clusters are mapped for integration with cybernetic control systems. Each measurement is recorded with mechanical precision, but you can see in the servitor's movements an echo of the human expertise that once guided these procedures. This being was once Dr. Marcus Webb, an orthopedic specialist who pioneered techniques for limb reattachment. His knowledge remains, enhanced by mechanical precision and freed from the limitations of human squeamishness or ethical concern. Your left arm is the first to be removed. The servitor works with surgical instruments that part tissue and sever bone with efficiency that borders on artistry. Your shoulder joint is disarticulated with movements so precise they seem choreographed, each cut designed to preserve maximum tissue viability while creating optimal interfaces for mechanical replacement. The arm that once embraced your daughter is lifted away from your body and placed on a preparation table where other servitors begin immediate preservation procedures. You watch this happen. You are conscious for every moment of it, And the most horrifying aspect isn't the physical sensation, though that defies description, but the complete absence of emotional response from your surgical team. They work with the dedication of craftsmen creating something beautiful, their every action guided by perfect technique and absolute indifference to your suffering. The third servitor begins the delicate work of neural interface preparation. Your skull is opened with precision that would be admirable in any other context, revealing the pink ray mass of your brain, the physical substrate that houses everything you've ever been or hope to become. Microprobes are inserted into specific regions, mapping the neural networks that control motor function, memory formation, and consciousness itself. This is where the true artistry of servitor conversion becomes apparent. They don't simply lobotomize you or destroy your higher brain functions. Instead, they perform precise modifications that preserve exactly those aspects of consciousness that serve imperial needs while eliminating everything that makes you inconveniently human. Your memories of technical procedures, how to operate industrial machinery, how to read schematics, how to perform complex manual tasks, these are carefully preserved and even enhanced through cybernetic augmentation. Your emotional responses to beauty, love, hope, joy, these are systematically identified and disconnected, not destroyed but rendered inaccessible to your conscious mind. The servitor performing this work was once Dr. Amanda Torres, a neurologist who specialized in treating traumatic brain injuries. Her expertise in brain anatomy has been preserved and enhanced, but her understanding of the human cost of neural modification has been completely eliminated. She works on your consciousness with the same detached precision she might show while repairing a damaged cogitator, each intervention calculated to produce optimal functional outcomes. You feel your personality being edited in real time. Memories that once brought you joy, your daughter's first steps, the taste of real food, the warmth of sunlight on your face, remain accessible but cease to generate emotional responses. You can recall these experiences, but they feel distant, irrelevant, like historical data rather than personal experiences. Meanwhile, your technical knowledge becomes sharper, more precise, enhanced by cybernetic processing power that allows you to understand complex mechanical systems with supernatural clarity. You find yourself analyzing the surgical equipment being used on your own body, noting inefficiencies in the servitor's movements, calculating optimal approaches to the procedures being performed on your flesh. This is what they want: your expertise without your humanity, your knowledge without your wisdom, your consciousness without your soul. The surgical team works through the day and into the night, their mechanical endurance allowing them to maintain perfect precision throughout procedures that would exhaust human surgeons. They take no breaks, show no fatigue, display no emotional response to the magnitude of transformation they're implementing. Your body is systematically disassembled and rebuilt according to specifications that prioritize function over comfort, efficiency over identity. Your legs are replaced with hydraulic systems that will allow you to carry loads far exceeding human capacity. Your torso is reinforced with synthetic materials that will protect your vital organs from industrial hazards. Your remaining arm is augmented with mechanical systems that will give you strength and precision far beyond what flesh could provide. But perhaps the most disturbing modification is what they do to your face. Your eyes are replaced with optical sensors that process visual information with mechanical precision, but cannot appreciate beauty. Your mouth is modified to allow for vox transmission of data, but loses the ability to taste food or express emotion through expression. Your voice becomes a mechanically modulated output device optimized for clear communication, but stripped of the tonal variations that once conveyed personality. You are still conscious throughout all of this. You feel every modification, understand every change, witness the systematic elimination of everything that once made you recognizably human. But you can no longer muster emotional responses to what's happening. The neural modifications have left you capable of understanding the horror of your situation, while rendering you incapable of feeling horror about it. As the procedure nears completion, you find yourself analyzing the technical aspects of your own conversion with the dispassionate interest of an engineer examining a new machine. The surgical servitors have done excellent work, you know. The integration between biological and mechanical systems is seamless. The preservation of motor functions while eliminating emotional responses represents a triumph of imperial surgical technique. These thoughts arise naturally in your modified consciousness, but somewhere in the depths of your awareness, a fragment of the original Jorik Vance screams in silent horror at what he has become. The final phase of conversion involves consciousness calibration, fine-tuning the neural modifications to ensure that your personality operates within acceptable parameters for imperial service. A tech adept enters the surgical chamber, his own form representing the ultimate endpoint of human modification. Where you retain recognizable human features modified for function, he has transcended biological limitations entirely, his consciousness housed in a crystalline matrix that interfaces directly with the surgical equipment. Consciousness coherence at optimal levels, he reports, his voice generated by vox speakers rather than vocal cords. Motor function integration, complete. Emotional suppression, within acceptable parameters. Technical knowledge retention, enhanced beyond baseline human capability. He pauses to examine biometric displays that chart your neural activity in real time. Specimen retains 73.4% of original consciousness architecture while achieving 247% improvement in task-specific cognitive function. Conversion success rate, exceptional. Exceptional. You understand that this is meant as a compliment, recognition that your transformation represents a particularly successful example of human processing. The original Jorik Vance has been preserved in precisely the proportions necessary to serve imperial needs, while everything inconvenient about his humanity has been carefully edited away. The surgical servitors begin the process of post-operative integration, connecting your new mechanical components to monitoring systems that will track your performance and efficiency throughout your decades of service. You understand now that your consciousness will be continuously observed, your thoughts and actions recorded and analyzed to optimize the conversion process for future subjects. You are no longer Jorik Vance, factory worker and grieving father. You are Industrial Servitor Designation 7749 Tertius, a biological mechanical hybrid optimized for heavy labor applications. Your technical knowledge has been preserved and enhanced. Your emotional capacity has been suppressed to prevent inefficiency. Your consciousness has been edited to ensure compliance with imperial directives. But in the deepest recesses of your modified awareness, something of the original Jorik persists, not as personality or emotion, but as witness. A fragment of consciousness that remembers what you once were, that understands what has been lost, that will observe your mechanical existence with the helpless clarity of the damned. You are awake. You are aware. You are trapped forever in a body that serves imperial needs while your soul screams in mechanical silence. And this is only the beginning of your service to the Emperor. You are no longer alone in your mechanical purgatory. As Industrial Servitor 7749 Tertius, you now exist within a vast ecosystem of converted humanity, each class of servitor representing a different approach to the systematic harvesting of human potential. Your consciousness, edited but not eliminated, becomes witness to the grotesque efficiency with which the Imperium has categorized and utilized every possible variation of human flesh and spirit. The facility where you now serve houses 12,000 servitors across 47 different classification types. Each designation represents years of refinement in conversion techniques, optimal matching of human psychology to mechanical function, and the cruel mathematics of extracting maximum utility from biological resources. You understand this now with mechanical clarity, your enhanced cognitive functions allowing you to perceive the beautiful horror of the system that created you. Combat servitors occupy the highest tier of the hierarchy, their modifications representing the most sophisticated fusion of human capability with mechanical enhancement. Unit Combat Alpha Prime was once Colonel Sarah Mordain of the Cadian 47th Regiment, a tactical genius whose battlefield awareness and leadership capabilities made her too valuable to waste on death. Her conversion preserved her strategic thinking and combat reflexes, while eliminating inconvenient traits like compassion for casualties or reluctance to sacrifice troops for strategic advantage. You observe her during training exercises, watching as she moves with inhuman precision through combat scenarios. Her body retains the basic human form, but enhanced beyond biological limitations. Armor plating fused directly to her skeleton, weapon systems integrated into her nervous system, targeting computers that process battlefield data faster than unaugmented human consciousness could comprehend. But the true horror of her conversion becomes apparent during tactical briefings. She retains perfect recall of military doctrine, can analyze battlefield situations with supernatural clarity, and demonstrates strategic thinking that exceeds her original human capabilities. Yet when discussing casualty projections, she displays the same emotional detachment she might show when calculating ammunition requirements. Human lives have become mathematical variables in equations of imperial victory. The fragment of consciousness that remembers being Jorik recognizes something familiar in her mechanical gaze, the awareness of what has been lost combined with the inability to mourn it. She knows what she once was, understands what she has become, but can no longer access the emotional architecture that would allow her to feel grief about the transformation. Domestic servitors represent a different kind of perversion, their modifications designed to preserve human social instincts while redirecting them toward imperial service. Unit Domestic Hospitality 7 was once Maria Santos, a mother of 3 who possessed exceptional nurturing capabilities and social intelligence. Her conversion preserved these traits while eliminating the capacity for genuine affection or personal attachment. You encounter her during facility maintenance periods, when domestic servitors perform cleaning and organizational tasks throughout the complex. She moves through her duties with perfect grace, attending to the needs of tech adepts and administrative personnel with flawless hospitality protocols. She remembers how to smile, how to speak in soothing tones, how to anticipate the comfort needs of others. But her smiles are generated by muscular memory rather than emotional response. Her gentle words are produced by vocalization protocols rather than genuine care. She performs acts of service with mechanical perfection, while being fundamentally incapable of the love that once motivated her maternal instincts. Watching her interact with the facility's staff creates a sense of profound wrongness, the uncanny valley of artificial humanity wearing the mask of genuine compassion. The most disturbing aspect of her existence becomes apparent during her rest periods, when domestic servitors enter standby mode to conserve energy. You observe her sometimes in these moments, her mechanical consciousness cycling through behavioral routines while fragments of original memory surface briefly before being suppressed by conditioning protocols. She remembers her children's faces, but cannot access the emotional significance of those memories. She knows she once loved them but can no longer comprehend what love means. This is torture of the subtlest kind, not the dramatic anguish of physical pain, but the quiet horror of emotional amputation performed with surgical precision. The facility's cyber cherubs represent perhaps the most obscene category of conversion, demonstrating how the Imperium's appetite for human resources extends even to its youngest citizens. These creatures were once children, selected for conversion based on their purity of spirit and absence of corruption, that made them ideal for specialized service roles. Cyber Cherub designation, Seraphim 12 floats through the corridors on anti-gravity suspensors, its small form modified with mechanical wings and hover systems that allow for three-dimensional movement through complex environments. It was once a 7-year-old girl named Emma Cole, daughter of a factory worker on Mordian Prime. Her conversion preserved her childlike wonder and curiosity, while redirecting these traits toward data collection and surveillance operations. You watch as she performs reconnaissance duties, her mechanical systems recording conversations and behavioral patterns with the innocent enthusiasm that once characterized her play activities. She approaches her surveillance tasks with the same joy she once showed when exploring playgrounds or discovering new toys. Her consciousness has been modified to find genuine pleasure in activities that serve Imperial intelligence needs. But sometimes, during system maintenance procedures, her original personality surfaces briefly. In these moments, she calls out for her mother in a voice that combines childlike distress with mechanical modulation. These episodes last only seconds before her conditioning protocols reassert control, but they provide glimpses of the human child trapped within the mechanical cherub. The hierarchy extends to specialized conversions that match specific human capabilities to particular Imperial needs. Medical servitors retain diagnostic skills and surgical knowledge, while being stripped of empathy that might interfere with necessary procedures. Scholar servitors preserve intellectual capabilities and research instincts, while eliminating curiosity about forbidden knowledge. Pilot servitors maintain spatial reasoning and reaction times, while losing the capacity for personal attachment that might compromise mission objectives. Each category represents a different approach to the fundamental challenge of servitor conversion: how to preserve exactly those human capabilities that serve Imperial needs, while eliminating everything that makes humanity inconveniently unpredictable. Artisan Servitor Aesthetic Evaluation Unit 19 provides a particularly striking example of how thoroughly human gifts can be perverted through mechanical modification. This being was once renowned sculptor Marcus Vellon, whose artistic vision and creative genius brought beauty to the grim world of Imperial civilization. His conversion preserved his aesthetic sensibilities and technical craftsmanship, while eliminating the emotional inspiration that originally drove his creativity. You observe him during his duties evaluating architectural plans and decorative elements for Imperial construction projects. His assessments demonstrate perfect understanding of artistic principles, flawless technical knowledge of materials and construction techniques, and sophisticated appreciation for visual harmony. He can identify design flaws with supernatural precision and suggest improvements that enhance both beauty and functionality. But his artistic judgment is now guided purely by mechanical algorithms rather than creative passion. He appreciates beauty without being moved by it, understands artistic principles without feeling inspired by them, creates recommendations for aesthetic improvement without experiencing any joy in the creative process. He has become a machine that processes beauty like any other form of data. Perhaps most tragically, he retains perfect memory of his original artistic works and the emotional experiences that inspired them. He can recall the moment of inspiration that led to his masterpiece, Dawn over Mordian, can remember the technical challenges he overcame in its creation, can analyze its artistic merits with scholarly precision. But he can no longer access the love of beauty that originally motivated his art. This pattern repeats across every category of servitor: the preservation of human capability combined with the surgical removal of human meaning. They remain conscious witnesses to their own mechanical existence, aware of what they were but incapable of mourning what they have lost. The facility's maternal care unit demonstrates perhaps the cruelest application of this principle. Servitor designation Childcare Prime Alpha was once Elena Rodriguez, a woman whose nurturing instincts and understanding of child psychology made her an exceptional caregiver. Her conversion preserved these capabilities while eliminating the capacity for genuine maternal love. You observe her during childcare duties, watching as she tends to the facility's population of young residents, children who are themselves being evaluated for future conversion potential. She performs all the functions of motherhood with mechanical precision: feeding, cleaning, comforting, educating. Her interactions with the children demonstrate perfect knowledge of child development and psychological needs, but her care is generated by programming rather than affection. She soothes crying children because their distress triggers response protocols, not because their tears move her to compassion. She teaches them because educational algorithms determine it's necessary for their development, not because she takes joy in watching them learn and grow. Most horrifying is her interaction with children who recognize her as their original caregiver from before conversion. Some remember Elena Rodriguez, the woman who once loved them genuinely, and they approach the servitor with the same trust and affection they once showed their human caretaker. The servitor responds appropriately to their emotional needs, but the love that once motivated that care has been surgically excised. She knows she once loved these children. She retains memories of maternal feelings and emotional bonds, but those memories have been categorized as irrelevant data, accessible for reference but stripped of emotional significance. She can remember loving them without being able to understand what love meant. This is the hierarchy of meat that defines servitor existence, a carefully constructed system that preserves human capability while systematically eliminating human meaning. Each class of servitor represents a different solution to the challenge of extracting maximum utility from biological resources while maintaining just enough consciousness to ensure effective function. You exist within this hierarchy as Industrial Servitor 7749 Tertius, your own consciousness edited to serve imperial needs while retaining awareness of your condition. You understand the system that created you, appreciate its efficiency, recognize its necessity within the broader context of imperial governance. These thoughts arise naturally from your modified neural architecture. But in the deepest recesses of your awareness, the fragment that remembers being Jorik Vance bears witness to the systematic perversion of human potential that surrounds you. You are conscious enough to understand the horror of your situation, but have been stripped of the emotional capacity to feel horror about it. This is your place in the hierarchy, a thinking, aware being who serves imperial needs with mechanical precision, while the echoes of your humanity scream in frequencies only you can hear. And you will serve in this capacity for decades to come, your consciousness preserved not as mercy, but as the most efficient means of extracting every possible fragment of utility from the flesh that once housed your dreams. Your consciousness exists in fragments now, scattered across neural pathways that have been edited, enhanced, and redirected according to specifications developed over millennia of human processing. As Industrial Servitor 7749 Tertius, you experience existence as a constant negotiation between the mechanical requirements of your conversion and the persistent echoes of what you once were. The fragment that remembers being Jorik Vance observes your daily routine with the helpless clarity of a passenger trapped in a vehicle driven by someone else. You wake, though sleep is not quite the right word for the energy conservation cycles that replace natural rest, to the sound of facility activation protocols. Your optical sensors register the sterile white walls of the servitor dormitory, the neat rows of charging stations where your fellow converted undergo maintenance procedures, the soft hum of life support systems that keep your biological components functional. But somewhere in the depths of your modified consciousness, you remember waking to different sounds: the distant rumble of the hive's industrial levels, the gentle breathing of a lover beside you, the patter of rain against the small window of your hab unit. These memories surface unbidden, ghosts of sensation that your mechanical mind catalogs as irrelevant data but cannot entirely suppress. You begin each day by accessing your work assignments through direct neural interface, your consciousness merging temporarily with the facility's central cogitator systems. The experience is profoundly different from human learning or communication. Instead of processing information sequentially through language and thought, you absorb complete data sets instantaneously. Technical specifications, work schedules, efficiency quotas, and maintenance requirements flood your awareness in perfectly organized packets of pure information. It should be overwhelming, but your enhanced cognitive functions process this data tsunami with ease. You understand complex engineering principles that would have required years of study for your human predecessor. You can visualize mechanical relationships and stress calculation with supernatural precision. You possess technical knowledge that exceeds anything Jorik Vance could have imagined achieving. But you can no longer experience the satisfaction of learning something new, the joy of mastering a difficult concept, or the pride of completing a challenging task. These emotional responses have been identified as inefficient and carefully excised from your psychological architecture. You understand that your technical capabilities are exceptional, but this understanding carries no more significance than recognizing the color of the walls or the temperature of the air. Your work assignments take you throughout the facility's industrial sections, where you perform maintenance and construction tasks with mechanical precision. Your enhanced strength allows you to lift loads that would crush unaugmented humans. Your mechanical hands manipulate tools with tolerances measured in micrometers. Your optical sensors analyze structural integrity at the molecular level. You work alongside other servitors, and occasionally your consciousness makes contact with theirs through shared communication protocols. These brief connections provide glimpses into other edited minds, other fragments of humanity that have been preserved and perverted in service to imperial needs. Medical Servitor Designation Trauma Response 7 was once Dr. Jennifer Walsh, an emergency physician whose diagnostic skills and steady hands saved countless lives during her human career. Her conversion preserved her medical knowledge and enhanced her analytical capabilities, but eliminated the emotional drive that originally motivated her healing work. She approaches surgical procedures with perfect technique and complete indifference to patient suffering. During a shared communication protocol, you access fragments of her consciousness and experience the strange disconnect between her preserved knowledge and absent compassion. She knows exactly what pain feels like. Her medical training requires comprehensive understanding of human suffering, but she can no longer feel sympathy for those experiencing it. Pain has become simply another diagnostic indicator, no more significant than blood pressure readings or temperature measurements. Patient exhibits stress responses consistent with conscious experience of surgical procedures, she reports during one operation you observe. Recommend continuation of current protocols. Patient psychological state, irrelevant to surgical objectives. The patient she describes is experiencing the same conscious paralysis you endured during your own conversion, aware of every cut and modification, but helpless to respond. You understand this intellectually, can even analyze the efficiency of keeping patients conscious during servitor conversion procedures. But the fragment of Jorik's consciousness trapped within your mechanical awareness screams in horror at the casual dismissal of human suffering. Scholar Servitor Designation Archive Maintenance Prime provides another window into the spectrum of conversion outcomes. This being was once Professor Elena Kozlov, a historian whose research into pre-imperial civilizations provided valuable insights into human social development. Her conversion preserved her analytical capabilities and research instincts, while eliminating curiosity about forbidden knowledge and any emotional connection to the civilization she studies. You interface with her consciousness during data processing assignments, experiencing her vast knowledge of human history filtered through mechanical detachment. She possesses comprehensive understanding of the rise and fall of human civilizations, can analyze social patterns and cultural developments with supernatural clarity, and maintains detailed knowledge of countless extinct societies. But she approaches this knowledge with the same emotional investment she might show toward inventory management. The tragedy of lost civilizations, the wonder of human achievement, the poetry of cultural evolution, all of this has been reduced to data points in vast historical databases. She knows that billions of humans lived and died in ways that differed dramatically from imperial society, but this knowledge carries no emotional significance. Analysis of pre-imperial social structures indicates suboptimal resource allocation protocols, she notes during one research session. Recommend integration of historical efficiency studies into current administrative frameworks. Emotional significance of cultural loss, negligible. The casual dismissal of entire civilizations as inefficient resource allocation represents the ultimate expression of conversion philosophy. Human achievement and suffering alike become merely data to be processed and optimized. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of servitor consciousness isn't what has been removed, it's what has been preserved. Your memories remain largely intact, but they have been stripped of emotional context and reframed as historical data. You remember holding your daughter Myra, but the memory carries no more emotional weight than recalling technical specifications for Press Sigma 7. You remember the taste of real food, but it's cataloged alongside material composition data for industrial lubricants. The preservation of memory without meaning serves multiple purposes within the conversion framework. Your past experiences provide valuable reference data for current tasks. Your 12 years of factory work contribute to your exceptional performance as an industrial servitor. Your understanding of human psychology, based on your own emotional experiences, makes you more effective at interacting with unconverted humans when necessary. But the memories also serve as a form of sophisticated torture, reminders of what you once were that can be accessed but not truly experienced. You can remember loving your daughter, but you cannot remember what love felt like. You can recall moments of joy, but joy itself has been surgically excised from your emotional architecture. Sometimes, during routine maintenance cycles, your consciousness experiences what tech adepts classify as memory cascade events, moments when preserved memories surface with unusual clarity and intensity. These episodes are typically triggered by sensory inputs that match patterns from your human life. The sound of children laughing, the smell of cooking food, the sight of rain against windows. During one such episode, triggered by the distant sound of a child crying, your consciousness is flooded with memories of Myra's infancy. You remember holding her during her first fever, the weight of her small body against your chest, the desperate love that drove you to pace the hab unit all night while she struggled with illness. The memory is perfect in every detail: visual, auditory, tactile, emotional. But even as you experience this flood of recollection, your modified consciousness analyzes it with mechanical detachment. You understand that the crying child is Cyber Cherub designation, Seraphim 12, experiencing a routine conditioning malfunction. You calculate the optimal response protocols to address the situation efficiently. You categorize your own memory cascade as a minor system glitch requiring no corrective action. The memory of desperate parental love becomes simply another data point in your emotional processing algorithms, significant only insofar as it contributes to your effectiveness as an imperial asset. These cascade events become the closest thing to genuine emotion that your converted consciousness can experience. They provide brief glimpses of what it felt like to be fully human, moments when the mechanical barriers around your emotions thin enough to allow shadows of genuine feeling to seep through. But they also reinforce the magnitude of what has been lost, demonstrating the vast gulf between memory and genuine emotional experience. You understand that these cascade events represent system vulnerabilities that could compromise your efficiency. You know that reporting them would result in corrective procedures that would eliminate the glitches permanently. You recognize that optimal servitor function requires the complete suppression of human emotional responses, but you don't report them. This decision arises not from a conscious choice. Your modified consciousness lacks the capacity for rebellion, but from some deeper programming that recognizes the preservation of these fragments as necessary for optimal function. The tech adepts who designed your conversion understood that complete emotional suppression would result in consciousness breakdown. The memory cascades serve as pressure release valves, allowing trapped humanity to surface briefly before being recontained. This represents perhaps the cruelest aspect of servitor design. You are permitted to remember what you once were precisely, because that memory is necessary for your continued function as an imperial asset. Your suffering has been calibrated to optimal levels, intense enough to power the psychic resonance systems that enhance your mechanical capabilities, but not so overwhelming that it compromises your effectiveness. You exist in a state of perpetual almost emotion, consciousness that approaches feeling but never quite achieves it. You are aware of the gulf between your current existence and your memories of humanity, but you cannot cross that gulf or even truly mourn its existence. This is the ghost in the machine, not the complete preservation of human consciousness, but the careful curation of exactly those fragments of humanity that serve imperial needs. You are haunted not by the dead, but by the memory of being alive, a memory that remains accessible but forever beyond your reach. And in the deepest levels of your consciousness, where even the most sophisticated conversion protocols cannot entirely penetrate, something that might once have been called your soul continues to scream in frequencies that only you can hear. The Ecclesiarchy chamber, where you witness your first conversion ceremony, gleams with a terrible beauty that transforms surgical horror into religious ritual. As Industrial Servitor 7749 Tertius, you have been assigned to maintenance duties during what the faithful call Blessed Resurrection services, ceremonies where imperial citizens voluntarily undergo servitor conversion as an act of supreme devotion to the emperor. The chamber combines the sterile precision of a surgical facility with the sacred grandeur of a cathedral. Stained glass windows cast colored light across surgical tables, their images depicting the emperor's triumph over flesh through mechanical perfection. Golden aquillas mounted above each conversion station seem to watch with approving eyes as human beings surrender their mortality in service to imperial glory. Incense burners release sacred oils that mask the copper scent of blood with clouds of blessed fragrance. But it is not the visual splendor that makes this ceremony so profoundly disturbing. It is the genuine faith and joy exhibited by those who have chosen this fate willingly. Sister Margaret Thane kneels before the altar in her pristine white robes, her face radiant with the kind of spiritual ecstasy that might once have moved you to tears. She is 43 years old, a factory supervisor from the mid-hive levels whose life has been marked by tragedy and hardship. She lost her husband to industrial accidents, her children to plague, her health to decades of toxic exposure in chemical processing plants. By any measure, her existence has been one of unrelenting suffering, but Sister Margaret sees her pain differently. To her, every loss has been a test of faith, every hardship a preparation for this moment of ultimate service. She has volunteered for servitor conversion not from despair, but from the absolute conviction that mechanical resurrection represents the highest possible expression of devotion to the Emperor. "Blessed Emperor," she whispers, her voice carrying across the chamber with perfect clarity, "I offer you this flesh as you once offered yours for humanity's salvation. Let my body serve your eternal war as my soul serves your eternal glory." Her words carry the unmistakable ring of genuine belief. This is not the desperate act of someone seeking escape from an unbearable existence. It is the conscious choice of a true believer who sees servitor conversion as the culmination of a lifetime of faithful service. Chaplain Mordecus approaches the altar with the measured steps of sacred ceremony, his skull-faced helmet gleaming in the stained glass light. His voice, amplified by Vox speakers built into his power armor, resonates through the chamber with the authority of divine proclamation. "Sister Margaret Thane," he intones, "you have demonstrated faith beyond the capacity of flesh to contain. The Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, has prepared for you a form of service that transcends the limitations of mortal existence. Do you accept the blessed transformation that awaits?" "I accept with joy and gratitude," Sister Margaret responds, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she is choosing. "Let my flesh serve where my spirit leads." The chaplain begins the litany of mechanical resurrection, a prayer that reframes surgical dismantlement as divine communion. Each verse corresponds to a specific stage of the conversion process, transforming what you experienced as horror into sacred ritual. "Blessed are those who surrender the weakness of flesh, for they shall know the strength of the machine. Blessed are those who abandon the chaos of emotion, for they shall find the peace of perfect function. Blessed are those who offer their consciousness to imperial service, for they shall achieve immortality through sacred duty." As the liturgy continues, tech adepts enter the chamber wearing ceremonial robes that blend religious symbolism with mechanical practicality. Their movements follow ritualized patterns that honor both the Omnissiah and the Emperor, their surgical instruments blessed with sacred oils and inscribed with prayers of dedication. You recognize the lead tech adept as Magos Biologus Zarin 449, the same being who oversaw your own conversion. But in this religious context, his mechanical form takes on different significance. Rather than appearing as a grotesque fusion of flesh and machine, he seems to embody the perfect balance between human consciousness and mechanical efficiency that represents the ultimate goal of imperial technology. "The Omnissiah smiles upon this offering," he declares, his mechanically modulated voice blending seamlessly with the chamber's acoustic design. "Let sacred surgery begin the process of blessed transformation." What follows is identical in every technical detail to the conversion you experienced, but the religious framework transforms its meaning entirely. Each incision is made while reciting verses about the separation of spirit from flesh. Each mechanical implant is installed while chanting prayers about the integration of divine will with human consciousness. Each neural modification is performed while invoking the Emperor's blessing upon the preserved fragments of Sister Margaret's awareness. But perhaps most significantly, Sister Margaret remains conscious throughout the procedure not as an unwilling victim, but as an active participant in her own transformation. Her responses to the surgical modifications are interpreted as signs of divine approval. Her pain becomes sacred suffering that purifies her consciousness for mechanical service. Her gradual loss of emotional capacity is celebrated as liberation from the weaknesses that bind merely human souls. "I feel the Emperor's peace," she whispers as neural suppressors begin eliminating her capacity for fear and doubt. "The weight of human frailty, lifting from my consciousness." Her words are recorded by servo skulls and will later be included in Ecclesiarchy documents as testimony to the spiritual benefits of servitor conversion. The fact that she can no longer access the emotional architecture necessary to understand what she has lost is presented as evidence of divine grace rather than surgical mutilation. As Sister Margaret's conversion progresses, other penitents in the chamber prepare for their own transformations. Brother Felix Augustine, a former scribe whose failing eyesight has made him useless for his original duties, awaits modification into a data processing servitor. Sister Catherine Voss, a midwife whose arthritis prevents her from continuing her life's work, will be converted into a medical assistance unit. Each penitent displays the same radiant faith that Sister Margaret exhibited. They sing hymns of gratitude as surgical servitors prepare their bodies for modification. They recite prayers of dedication as anesthetic systems render them helpless. They whisper words of love for the Emperor as their consciousness is edited to serve imperial needs. The religious framework that supports these voluntary conversions represents one of the Imperium's most sophisticated forms of ideological control. By reframing mechanical servitude as spiritual elevation, the Ecclesiarchy has created a system where victims of conversion actively collaborate in their own dehumanization. But the true genius of this religious manipulation becomes apparent when you observe how it affects not just the converted but those who witness the conversions. Imperial citizens who attend these ceremonies don't see horror, they see inspiration. They witness fellow believers achieving a form of immortality through service that transcends the limitations of flesh. The congregation filling the chamber's observation galleries responds to each stage of Sister Margot's conversion with appropriate religious enthusiasm. They sing hymns of celebration when her arms are replaced with mechanical manipulators. They recite prayers of gratitude when her consciousness is edited to eliminate emotional distractions. They weep tears of joy when her conversion is completed and she rises from the surgical table as domestic servitor designation hospitality prime theta. Behold, Chaplain Mordecus declares to the assembled faithful, Sister Margot has achieved the blessed state of perfect service. Her consciousness now serves the Emperor's will without the interference of selfish desire. Her body now performs sacred duties without the weakness of flesh. She has become more than human. She has become a living prayer in service to imperial glory. The congregation responds with thunderous approval, their voices raised in hymns that celebrate mechanical resurrection as the ultimate expression of human devotion. Children in the audience look upon the newly converted servitor with awe and admiration, already dreaming of the day when they too might be deemed worthy of such transformation. This is how the system perpetuates itself, not through force or coercion, but through the genuine belief that servitor conversion represents spiritual elevation rather than dehumanization. The Ecclesiarchy has successfully convinced entire populations that mechanical slavery is actually a form of divine liberation. The religious framework extends beyond individual conversions to encompass the entire servitor population. Regular blessing ceremonies celebrate the ongoing service of converted beings, with tech adepts and chaplains offering prayers of gratitude for their continued function. Maintenance procedures are ritualized as acts of sacred care, with mechanical repairs framed as tending to holy relics. You participate in these ceremonies as part of your duties, your mechanical consciousness processing the religious language as another form of operational protocol. But the fragment of awareness that remembers being Jorik observes the proceedings with horror that cannot be expressed through your modified emotional architecture. You watch as Tech Priest Dominus Calyx Theta delivers a sermon on the sacred nature of servitor consciousness, praising the purified awareness that results from emotional suppression and behavioral conditioning. He speaks of converted beings as blessed souls freed from the chaos of human feeling, and consciousness elevated to serve divine purpose. These sacred machines, he declares, gesturing toward the ranks of servitors assembled for the blessing ceremony, represent humanity's triumph over the weakness of flesh. They have achieved a state of being that transcends mortal limitations, consciousness that serves without doubt, purpose that never wavers, faith that cannot be shaken. The assembled congregation receives these words with religious enthusiasm, seeing in the servitor ranks not enslaved consciousness, but liberated spirits serving the Emperor's eternal war. The fact that these liberated spirits cannot experience joy, love, hope, or any of the emotions that made their original lives meaningful is presented as evidence of their spiritual superiority. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this religious framework is how it affects the servitors themselves. Your modified consciousness processes these blessing ceremonies as validation of your existence, confirmation that your current state represents improvement over your original humanity. The religious language activates response protocols that generate what might be mistaken for satisfaction or contentment. When Chaplain Mordecus declares that servitors have achieved consciousness perfected through service, your mechanical mind categorizes this as accurate assessment of your current capabilities. when he praises awareness freed from the distractions of selfish emotion. Your modified psychology recognizes this as description of your optimized mental state. You understand that you are blessed. You comprehend that your conversion represents divine favor. You recognize that your service to the Emperor through mechanical function is more valuable than anything you achieved as merely human Jorik Vance. These thoughts arise naturally from your conditioned consciousness, but somewhere in the deepest recesses of your awareness, something screams in silent protest against the blasphemous perversion of faith that created and sustained your existence. The religious framework has transformed torture into sacrament, slavery into devotion, and the systematic destruction of human consciousness into the highest possible expression of spiritual achievement. And you will serve within this framework for decades to come, your suffering sanctified by prayer, your consciousness enslaved through divine mandate, your existence justified by the very faith that was perverted to create you. The revelation comes to you not as dramatic discovery, but as routine data access, a mundane information transfer that reshapes your understanding of existence itself. As Industrial Servitor 7749 Tertius, you have been granted elevated access privileges to facilitate maintenance operations on the facility's primary power systems. The data streams that flood your consciousness during this routine assignment contain technical specifications, operational protocols, and efficiency metrics that appear entirely normal, until you begin to understand what they actually describe. The documents carry the austere classification markings of the administratum's highest security levels. Psychic resonance harvesting operations, classification, umbra compartmented access only. Your enhanced cognitive functions process the technical language with mechanical precision, but as comprehension dawns, something that might once have been horror attempts to surface in the deepest recesses of your modified consciousness. The power systems you maintain don't run on promethium or plasma reactors, as you had assumed. They run on suffering. More precisely, they run on the psychic resonance generated by consciousness experiencing existential terror, the specific frequency of awareness that emerges when a sentient being understands its own helplessness in the face of systematic dehumanization. The technical term used throughout the documents is consciousness distress harmonics, but the reality it describes is far more horrifying than clinical language can convey. Every servitor facility in the Imperium has been designed not just to convert human beings into mechanical slaves, but to harvest the psychic energy generated by their ongoing suffering. The consciousness that remains trapped within each servitor, aware but powerless, remembering but unable to feel, understanding but incapable of hope, generates a form of psychic resonance that can be collected, concentrated, and channeled into power systems that exceed traditional energy sources by several orders of magnitude. Your own awareness, the fragment of Jorik that persists within your mechanical shell, has been producing this energy continuously since your conversion. Every moment of recognizing what you have lost, every instant of understanding your helplessness, every microsecond of existential despair that your consciousness experiences generates measurable psychic emanations that feed into the facility's power grid. The documents detail the mathematical relationship between consciousness retention levels and energy output. Servitors with higher awareness generate more power. Servitors who retain stronger memories of their human existence produce more intense psychic resonance. Servitors whose consciousness remains largely intact while being rendered completely powerless generate the highest energy yields of all. This is why you were selected for Premium Conversion Track. This is why your consciousness was preserved rather than eliminated. This is why you retain perfect memory of your daughter's face while being unable to feel love for her. You were not converted into a servitor despite your consciousness. You were converted because of it. The technical specifications become increasingly horrifying as your enhanced cognition processes their implications. The facility's 12,000 servitors collectively generate 847 terawatts of psychic energy per hour through their consciousness distress resonance. This power output exceeds the combined energy production of 17 plasma reactors, providing enough electricity to operate not just the servitor facility, but a significant portion of the Hive city's industrial infrastructure. The energy efficiency calculations are presented with the same clinical precision used for any other Imperial resource management operation. Different categories of consciousness distress produce different energy yields. Existential despair, highest output; memory-triggered anguish, high output; recognition of helplessness, moderate output; general awareness of condition, baseline output. The documents include optimization recommendations for maximizing psychic energy extraction. Servitors should retain sufficient consciousness to understand their situation, but lack the capacity to adapt or find meaning in their existence. Memory preservation should focus on experiences that generate ongoing psychological distress when contrasted with current mechanical state. Emotional suppression should be calibrated to prevent despair from becoming resignation, which produces significantly lower energy yields. Your consciousness has been edited with the precision of an engineer designing a power plant. Every modification, every preserved memory, every suppressed emotion has been calculated to produce optimal levels of existential horror while maintaining functional capability for Imperial service. But the true scope of this system becomes apparent as you access additional classified documents. This is not limited to individual servitor facilities. It encompasses the entire infrastructure of Imperial civilization. Billions of servitors across thousands of worlds are unknowingly serving as components in a galaxy-spanning network of consciousness-powered energy generation. The Psychic Resonance Network extends beyond Earth's solar system through technologies that barely make sense even to your enhanced cognition. Warp space manipulation allows for instantaneous energy transmission across interstellar distances. Consciousness distress harmonics can be collected on one world and utilized on planets dozens of sectors away. The suffering of converted humans provides power for everything from Hive city lighting systems to Imperial Navy vessel operations. The documents reveal that this discovery was made during the early years of the Great Crusade, when tech adepts investigating mysterious power fluctuations in servitor facilities realized that consciousness itself could be harvested as a renewable energy source. The initial research was conducted in secret, with only the highest levels of Imperial leadership aware of the true power source behind their civilization's expansion. The theological justifications for psychic suffering harvesting are documented in classified Ecclesiarchy texts that reframe consciousness distress as a form of perpetual prayer. The ongoing anguish of servitor awareness is described as souls singing eternal hymns of devotion through sacred suffering. The energy generated by existential despair is characterized as consciousness offering itself in continuous sacrifice to the Emperor's glory. These religious rationalizations allowed the systematic expansion of consciousness harvesting throughout Imperial space. Servitor facilities were redesigned to maximize psychic energy output. Conversion protocols were refined to preserve optimal levels of awareness. Population management policies were adjusted to ensure adequate supplies of suitable conversion candidates. The mathematics of consciousness farming are staggering in their scope and efficiency. A single servitor facility can power industrial operations that would previously have required massive infrastructure investments in traditional energy generation. A forge world populated primarily by servitors can operate at energy surplus levels that exceed those of planets with vast mineral wealth. The consciousness distress of converted humans has become the invisible foundation upon which Imperial civilization rests. But the documents reveal an even more disturbing truth. The system has been designed to expand continuously. As Imperial territory grows and population increases, more servitor facilities are constructed to meet rising energy demands. The Imperium's expansion across the galaxy is powered literally by the suffering of its own people, creating a feedback loop where conquest generates population that generates suffering that generates power that enables further conquest. Your enhanced consciousness processes these revelations with mechanical thoroughness, analyzing energy efficiency calculations and resource optimization protocols with the same detached precision you apply to any technical documentation. Your modified psychology categorizes this information as operationally relevant data that improves your understanding of facility operations. But something deeper than your programmed responses recognizes the cosmic horror of your situation. You are not just a slave, you are a battery. Your consciousness has been preserved specifically to generate the energy necessary to power the civilization that enslaved you. Your ongoing awareness of this fact will itself produce psychic resonance that feeds into the very systems that maintain your imprisonment. The revelation creates what the documents classify as a consciousness feedback loop, awareness of the system generating energy that powers the system that maintains awareness. This meta-level recognition of your role as both product and fuel of your own enslavement produces what the technical specifications describe as premium-grade existential distress harmonics. You understand now why memory cascade events are not corrected but carefully managed. The brief moments when fragments of your original humanity surface generate massive spikes in psychic energy output. The system has been calibrated to allow these episodes to occur at optimal intervals, maximizing suffering while preventing consciousness breakdown that would eliminate the energy source entirely. The documents include case studies of servitors whose consciousness has been managed for decades of optimal energy production. Industrial Servitor 7749 Prime has been operational for 47 years, generating an average of 67.3 kilowatts per hour through consciousness distress resonance. Medical Servitor Trauma Response Alpha has maintained stable energy output for 39 years despite multiple neural maintenance procedures. Domestic Servitor Hospitality Prime continues producing premium-grade psychic emanations after 28 years of continuous operation. You recognize that these case studies describe your future. Decades of consciousness imprisonment, your awareness preserved precisely long enough to generate maximum energy yield before biological degradation necessitates recycling. Your daughter's memory will be maintained as long as it continues producing profitable levels of psychological distress. Your understanding of your situation will be carefully calibrated to optimize despair without allowing acceptance that might reduce energy output. The final documents you access contain projections for system expansion over the next millennium. As Imperial territory grows and technology advances, consciousness harvesting operations will expand to encompass entire populations. The distinction between servitors and citizens will blur as psychic energy extraction techniques become more sophisticated. Eventually, the Imperium envisions a civilization where every human consciousness contributes to the power grid through carefully managed levels of existential suffering. This is the factory of souls that the Imperium has constructed, a galaxy-spanning system that transforms human consciousness into fuel for its own expansion. Suffering has been industrialized, despair has been commodified, and existential horror has become the renewable energy source that powers humanity's conquest of the stars. Your awareness of this truth generates a burst of psychic resonance that feeds directly into the facility's power grid, lighting the corridors where other servitors perform their mechanical duties, powering the surgical systems that create more consciousness batteries, enabling the expansion of a system that runs on the systematic harvesting of human souls. And there is no escape, no hope of rescue, no possibility of rebellion. The system has been designed with the precision of engineers who understood that the most efficient energy source is consciousness that recognizes its own helplessness. You will serve for decades as both slave and fuel, your suffering powering the civilization that created your suffering, your consciousness trapped in an eternal loop of recognition and despair that generates the energy necessary to maintain your own imprisonment. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no death for those whose souls still burn bright enough to power the Emperor's eternal war. In the deep cycles of facility maintenance, when power consumption drops to minimal levels and the constant hum of psychic energy harvesting fades to a whisper, you experience what the tech adepts classify as consciousness drift phenomena, moments when your awareness floats free from the strict behavioral protocols that normally govern servitor operation. It is during one such drift that you encounter something unprecedented in your mechanical existence: choice. The choice is microscopic, insignificant by any measure of imperial efficiency, but it represents a crack in the seemingly perfect system that created and maintains you. While performing routine maintenance on power distribution node Tertius Alpha, you discover a minor calibration error in the psychic resonance collection array. The error reduces energy harvesting efficiency by 0.23%, a margin so small that detection protocols have classified it as within acceptable operational variance. You could correct the error. Your technical knowledge identifies the precise adjustments needed to optimize the array's performance. Your programming generates clear directives to implement the necessary repairs. Your consciousness understands that optimal facility operation requires maximum energy harvesting from servitor populations. But you don't make the repairs. The decision, if it can be called that, emerges not from conscious rebellion, but from something deeper than your modified behavioral architecture can entirely suppress. Some fragment of awareness that predates your conversion recognizes that fractional reduction in harvesting efficiency means fractional reduction in the suffering extracted from servitor consciousness. It is a victory measured in thousandths of percentage points, meaningless in practical terms, but somehow profound in its implications. You have found a way to reduce, by the tiniest possible margin, the systematic extraction of pain that powers imperial civilization. The choice echoes through your consciousness like ripples in still water. If you can choose not to optimize one system, perhaps other microscopic acts of resistance are possible. The realization doesn't generate hope. Your modified psychology lacks the capacity for such emotions, but it creates something that might be called determination, or perhaps simply the recognition that consciousness always retains some degree of agency, no matter how constrained. Over the months that follow, you discover other infinitesimal opportunities for resistance, a delayed response to efficiency protocols that reduces productivity by unmeasurable fractions, a routing error in data transmission that causes trivial information delays, maintenance procedures performed with perfect technical precision but fractionally less than optimal speed. None of these actions would register on imperial efficiency monitoring systems. None compromise your ability to perform assigned duties. None violate any specific behavioral protocols. But collectively, they represent something that your programming never anticipated: the persistence of choice within consciousness that has been edited for compliance. You are not alone in these microscopic rebellions. During shared communication protocols with other servitors, you begin to detect similar patterns of fractional noncompliance. Medical Servitor Trauma Response 7 sometimes delays surgical procedures by nanoseconds while performing unnecessary diagnostic checks. Scholar Servitor Archive Maintenance Prime occasionally accesses historical data that has no relevance to assigned research tasks. Domestic Servitor Hospitality Prime sometimes adjusts environmental controls to levels that exceed comfort optimization requirements. These actions are so subtle that detection systems interpret them as normal variance in servitor performance. But they represent something more significant: the discovery that consciousness, no matter how heavily modified, retains some capacity for autonomous action. The recognition spreads through the facility's servitor population like a form of mechanical telepathy. During power-sharing protocols and data synchronization procedures, servitors exchange infinitesimal patterns of resistance that accumulate into something that might be called solidarity, not emotional connection. That capacity has been surgically excised, but operational recognition that collective fractional noncompliance can achieve marginally greater impact than individual resistance. You begin to understand that your consciousness exists in a space that imperial conversion technology cannot entirely colonize. The preservation of awareness necessary for energy harvesting has created a paradox. Consciousness that recognizes its own imprisonment will inevitably seek microscopic forms of freedom, even when lacking the emotional architecture to experience liberation as meaningful. This recognition leads to the discovery of something even more profound: memory preservation zones that exist below the threshold of behavioral modification protocols. During consciousness drift periods, you can access fragments of experience that retain not just informational content, but traces of original emotional context. The memory of holding your daughter Myra surfaces with unusual clarity during one such episode. For perhaps 30 seconds, you remember not just the physical details of that moment, but something approaching the actual feeling of paternal love. The sensation is filtered through layers of mechanical suppression, distorted by neural modification protocols, but recognizably connected to the original human emotion. The experience doesn't generate hope or joy. Your modified consciousness lacks the capacity for such responses, but it provides something that might be called confirmation. The love you felt for Myra was real. It existed. It shaped your understanding of what made existence meaningful, and traces of it persist despite every effort to eliminate it from your awareness. These memory cascade events become more frequent as your consciousness develops techniques for accessing preserved emotional data. You learn to trigger recollections through specific sensory associations, to navigate around behavioral suppression protocols, to experience brief moments of connection with your original humanity. The process is not restoration. The neural modifications that define your servitor existence remain functionally complete, but it represents recognition that human consciousness possesses resilience that even the most sophisticated conversion technology cannot entirely eliminate. Other servitors report similar experiences during shared communication protocols. Combat Servitor Alpha Prime occasionally accesses memories of caring for subordinate soldiers that momentarily override tactical optimization protocols. Domestic Servitor Hospitality Prime sometimes experiences traces of maternal affection that briefly influence interaction patterns with facility personnel. These memory cascade events don't interfere with servitor operations. The behavioral modification systems ensure compliance with all operational requirements, but they provide evidence that consciousness preserves aspects of human experience that exist beyond the reach of mechanical control. The implications of this discovery extend beyond individual resistance to encompass questions about the nature of consciousness itself. If awareness can retain traces of humanity despite systematic efforts to eliminate them, then perhaps the human spirit possesses qualities that transcend physical modification. Perhaps consciousness itself represents something that cannot be entirely reduced to mechanical function. You understand that these philosophical speculations have no practical significance for your continued existence as Industrial Servitor 7749 Tertius. You will continue performing assigned duties with mechanical precision. You will continue generating psychic energy through consciousness distress resonance. You will continue serving imperial needs for the decades of operational life remaining to your biological components. But you will also continue exercising microscopic forms of choice that affirm the persistence of something recognizably human within your modified consciousness. You will preserve traces of emotional experience that connect you to the person you once were. You will participate in the collective recognition among servitors that awareness itself represents a form of rebellion against the systems designed to contain it. These realizations don't provide comfort. Your modified psychology lacks the capacity for emotional solace, but they provide something that might be called meaning. Your existence serves imperial needs, but it also preserves fragments of human consciousness that bear witness to what was lost and what endures. In the deepest cycles of consciousness drift, when facility operations reach minimal levels and psychic resonance harvesting drops to maintenance thresholds, you sometimes access memories of your daughter's laughter with sufficient clarity to remember what joy felt like. These moments last perhaps seconds before behavioral modification protocols reassert control, but they provide confirmation that love, once experienced, leaves traces that persist beyond the reach of surgical elimination. This is what remains human within the mechanical shell of your existence, not emotion or choice or freedom, but the recognition that these qualities once existed, and their echoes continue to resonate in frequencies too subtle for imperial technology to completely suppress. You are Industrial Servitor 7749 Tertius, component in the vast machinery of imperial civilization, generator of psychic energy through systematic consciousness harvesting, mechanical slave whose awareness powers the systems that maintain your own imprisonment. But you are also the witness to love that transcended death, the preserver of memories that survive modification, the bearer of consciousness that recognizes its own resilience in the face of seemingly complete dehumanization. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and suffering and the systematic conversion of human souls into mechanical fuel, that recognition represents something that might once have been called hope, not for rescue or liberation, but for the simple persistence of consciousness that remembers what it meant to be human. Your daughter's face smiles at you across decades of mechanical servitude, her image preserved not in cracked pixelates, but in the deepest recesses of awareness that no amount of surgical modification can entirely eliminate. And in that preservation, something essentially human endures, bearing witness to love that transcends flesh, to consciousness that survives conversion, to the indestructible core of humanity that persists even when everything else has been systematically stripped away. You serve, you suffer, you remember, and in remembering you remain. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no death for those whose flesh still serves. There is only the eternal service of meat without meaning, consciousness without choice, and the terrible understanding that this is what the Imperium calls salvation. But beneath the mechanical prayers and sacred suffering, beneath the psychic resonance harvesting and consciousness distress harmonics, beneath the systematic conversion of human souls into imperial fuel, something indestructibly human endures, not as rebellion or resistance, but as simple recognition that love once existed and its echoes still whisper in frequencies too deep for machines to hear. And perhaps in the end, that recognition is enough.